Sorry about that. This is Mike Plaisance with the Republican newspaper and Mass Live. We are at Lynch School on Cabot Street in Holyoke as a discussion is set to begin on an $800,000 study about whether Holyoke should build 1 or 2 new middle schools. The cost of that would be in the multiple millions of dollars. The Holyoke Public Schools is holding this, and they should be getting underway soon. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming. Feel free to take a seat. And I'm sure some more folks will arrive throughout the evening. So welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos. Primero, yo quiero preguntar si hay alguien que necesita traducción. Hay personas que hablan español solamente, porque tenemos Eliana que puede ayudar con eso. Nope, so it looks like we're okay for translation at the moment. Well, again, I just want to help welcome you all to this important public meeting to discuss the future of middle schools in the city of Holyoke. There's been a committed group of people that have worked for several months now on getting to the point we are at tonight to be able to move the process forward and engage with the community in the weeks to come as to what kinds of middle schools we want in the city. We, as you'll see tonight, you'll hear a presentation from our team of architects, as well as our project manager, and everyone has worked really hard on this. We have the local school building advisory committee that has been meeting weekly, discussing the options, taking surveys, and we've heard throughout the past several years the need and desire to return to a middle school model in the city of Holyoke after years of having a K-8 model in the district. And so what we're doing now is assessing sites in the community, and we're at one of those sites now in the vacant parcels of land across the street on Chestnut Street as one of the potential sites, and then other areas throughout the city as well. I also want to thank the members of the school committee who are here with us tonight as well. We have Ward 4 Representative Irene Feliciano Sims, Ward 1 Mildred Lefebvre, Ward 3 Dennis Burks, Ward 6 Ronnie Collmore, and I think that's it for school committee members. I just want to thank them for their service and commitment as well, both on the school committee, but also their work in advising the work around the middle schools. One of the biggest concerns we hear from parents and families around the middle school opportunities in the district is that depending on what K-8 school you go to, depends on what type of educational facilities you may have access to in those buildings, whether it's arts and music or engineering and math, science laboratories. And one of our guiding principles moving forward, and we want to get input as to what you would like to see in middle schools, is making sure that all middle school students have access to a high quality educational experience, but also the top-notch facility as well in our community. And it's also important to note that the last time the city of Holyoke got a new school constructed was in 1989. So almost 30 years ago was the last time that Holyoke was getting a school newly constructed here in the city. So I think it's long overdue that we get this investment. Overall, it is an expensive proposition, but what greater investment than to invest in making sure that all students get a great education here in the city of Holyoke. And with the Mass School Building Authority, this is an opportunity to get upwards of 70%, up to 80% reimbursement on some of these projects. So again, I want to thank everyone who's been involved up to this point. Particularly want to thank the community members, parents, students who are here tonight and who will engage with us in the coming weeks and months because I think that's the most important part of this process. By investing so much time, energy, and resources, we want to make sure that the final outcome is something that the community and all of us can be proud of. So thank you again for being here tonight, and I'm going to introduce Dory, who represents the architectural firm that has been working with the city to move this project forward. Anyway, I'll hand it over to Dr. Zweig first, actually.
So welcome. I see all kinds of people here. I see teachers, parents, students, elected officials. So thank you for being here tonight. I'm privileged to be here to kick off what I think is a really exciting journey for the school system to get a state-of-the-art school building here, which we haven't had in over 30 years in Holyoke. And we're committed to developing a pathway for every student. We want students to graduate our schools who are thinkers, who are communicators, who are proud of their community, who are leaving our schools with more than just a diploma. But a big part of that is what happens in schools. But having the quality facility to do that is really important as well. And since I've arrived in Holyoke, I've heard loud and clear that we have issues with our heating and cooling systems. They don't exactly heat when they're supposed to. They don't cool when they're supposed to. We have issues with being able to see out of windows. The artificial daylight isn't. Our lighting isn't strong. Both artificially and through windows. The safety of our buildings as students enter the building and people enter the building. We don't have the state-of-the-art technology for that. So just on a pure facility level, having a building that's conducive to learning, to high-quality outcomes for kids is really important. The second thing I'd say is when I arrived here, I've learned about in Holyoke, it's hard to get everybody to agree on something. Getting consensus is near impossible, right? I learned that pretty quickly. But I have been shocked at how unanimous the support has been for middle schools. From the moment I arrived, from many of the school committee members who are here tonight, I heard it from them, and I have to say I didn't believe it when I first heard it. But then as I talked to parents, and we talked to students, and we talked to teachers as well, to a person, they felt like the move to K-8s was a mistake for the city of Holyoke. And now that I've seen it, I believe that it's important for us to think about standalone middle schools that serve a unique age for students. And in today's 21st century learning experiences, we need our students to be prepared. The buildings we have don't necessarily prepare our kids. And also the way we staff them programmatically don't work. We have teachers who are teaching multiple grade levels, who are teaching multiple content areas. It's very hard to be an 8th grade teacher who teaches math and science to both 7th and 8th grade. In some cases, we have teachers teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so there's nothing in the research that suggests that is good for kids, and it makes it difficult for our teachers to attract quality teachers and to retain teachers, because most come very invested in their subject area and want to remain there. We also need state-of-the-art facilities that prepare our students for all students, not just general education, but our EL students, our special education students, our students with mental health issues. We need a facility that prepares them for what's next. Many of you know we've invested in a high school redesign where we're asking students to choose academies that are centered around global studies, technology, around performing arts, just to name a few. We need a middle school experience that prepares them for what they're going to see in high school. So it begins here tonight, and one of our values as a district is to be innovative and bold. We want to be bold. This is not an opportunity to just build a cookie-cutter school. This school is for today, but it's also for 50 years from now. And we need to start thinking about that. So I don't want people to think about what a student of 2018, I can't remember what year it is, but 2018 needs, but what does a student of 2050, 2060 need to be successful? And it starts with the bold ideas here tonight. So I challenge you, I urge you to be part of this process. This is the first meeting of what will be many conversations. We were fortunate to hear from teachers today and staff. The architects and the designers have talked to other staff in the district. But this is our opportunity to hear from you, and we hope that you stay involved in the process along the way. I do want to thank the school committee members who have been champions of this project from the moment I arrived, and who were really committed to bringing a new school to Holyoke, and we're committed to wanting a middle school for the children of this community. So thank you. I turn it over to Dory to take it from here.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Dory Brooks. I'm a project architect with Jones-whitsett-architects. We've been selected to be the architects for this project. We are thrilled to be able to be the architects for this project. It means a great deal to us because we're a Western Massachusetts firm, and this is what we do. This is the heart and soul of our work, is working on school design. And we are very well aware of the energy and the history and the excitement in this community. And we look forward to making a school that's appropriate to your community. I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping to give you just a preview of what we're going to do tonight. There's an agenda on your table. We're going to talk through the process, because really what this is about is just kicking off a process that's going to last 4 years. It's a long process, and it involves a lot of thinking and study and talking, as well as designing, sharing our designs with you. But it's ultimately your school, so it's really important to us to hear from members of the community as we do this process. So I want to talk a little bit about the process, the initial goals that we're currently pursuing as part of the feasibility study, the schedule for all of this. And then we'd like to take a moment to just hear from you a little bit, know who you are and what brings you out tonight. And then we're going to talk about the educational programming part of the process. What makes us unique as a project is that there aren't currently middle schools. The Peck Lawrence situation is the closest we have to a middle school in this district currently. So really the district is having to rethink what middle schools should be. And that's a really interesting process. And this architectural project pushes along that process at the same time. So that's an unusual situation for us to be in. And then we're also going to explore some of the sites. Now, I say this as a kickoff because we don't have all the answers. We really want to hear from you. We have been working for about a month now, meeting with teachers in the district and learning about the district's needs for middle schools. But it's really just the very beginning. So while we want to share what we've learned, we also really want to hear from you, and that's a really important part of tonight. So feel free to participate at the end with questions, as well as telling us a little about yourself along the way. So first off, just to tell you a little bit more about ourselves. Jones-whitsett-architects is based in Greenfield, Massachusetts. It was founded by Margot Jones. And my other partner at the firm is Christian Winsett. You'll be hearing from both of them. We are a firm of 11 people in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And again, this is really the focus of what we do. All those blue dots represent communities in which we have done a school project of some kind, so 20 schools over 30 years. And on the right-hand side is a picture of Plains Elementary. That's a school we recently opened in 2016, not very far from here. So we have that to point to and say, really, no, we know what we're doing. And we are excited to do what we do here in this community. This is also the team that's involved on this project. So a school project involves a number of consultants, different engineers of different subsets, security consultants, interior design consultants. So while you'll see a lot of us, and me in particular, this is sort of a daily experience for me, there are a number of people behind us who are actually also working really hard to bring about this project. And I just wanted to honor them and mention that while we are a women-owned business, over 70% of the fee associated with this project will go to women and minority-owned businesses that are part of our design team. And that's a very high percentage and unusual. A number of those firms, Sovereign, for instance, are in Holyoke or very near to Holyoke. So we're actually very proud of how Western Mass-based our design team is. The overall schedule, so as I said, it's a little hard to give you specifics on how long this will take because there are a lot of decisions that get made along the way that affect schedule. But in the initial phase, I can tell you that we are, currently this project has been committed to by the Mass School Building Authority and the city as a feasibility study. and that's what we're currently looking at. So we're exploring options and locations and getting a sense of scale of the project, and then developing a preliminary set of designs that then the city will commit to with the state, and once that occurs, we go into more detailed design. So the purple, basically most of this year will be spent on that feasibility study schematic design phase, and then the city will really make a final decision about moving forward on the project. Once they do, we'll spend a year doing all the detail work on it to prepare for it to be bid, and share a report to the state and to the city, and then we move forward. So what is the project scope? What we need to be exploring right now is whether or not this is 2 schools to serve 550 students each, or 1 school for 1,100 students. That question is posed partly because the state wants this community to know what the difference between those 2 situations looks like financially and physically. They also want us at the same time to explore, well, just let's stop a second and point out that this is Lawrence School. This is the site of study. And I know that it's a school that has a lot of sentimental value to a lot of people who probably went to school here. But from the standpoint of a 21st century school, if you look around, you'll notice throughout Lawrence a lot of deficits. So this is a school that they also want us to explore. What would it look like to expand this into a 550 student middle school? Can it be done? What would be sacrificed in doing that? What would be the costs of doing that? And what would that look like? So we'll look at that. But you can start to see some of the deficits of the school pretty easily by looking around the room. And then we will also explore different sites and how these types of scenarios will look on different sites. And at this point, we're working with a committee, the school building committee, to explore what those options are and to get their input as sort of a guide for the district. And we're sharing our thinking with them as we go forward. And then once we determine the sites, we establish the constraints for the different sites. Maybe it requires buying a piece of land, maybe it requires hazmat cleanup. We have to know what the costs of that are. At the same time, on a parallel track, we're trying to explore with the district what the educational goals of the project are, what that physically requires, how much space, how many classrooms, what kinds of spaces. And then that program design really guides us as we move through the project. And then we explore the advantages and disadvantages and get some preliminary costs. And that's all we're doing at this phase of the work. We're not necessarily picking a direction. We want to present all of that and look at it objectively. We're really interested in hearing from you about your objectives for the project. We've heard from a lot of people, but having a community group together is a rare opportunity for us. So I want to invite Joseph Krupczynski, who's our civic engagement consultant on this project, to join me. And we want to just first find out a little bit about you and what draws you out tonight so that we can kind of respond to some of your interesting questions.
How is everyone? It's good to see some familiar faces here tonight. And so we want to just start by kind of getting a sense of who's in the room, right? So so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and it's like back to school. Just raise your hand if this applies to you. So how many parents of Holyoke schools children do we have in the room? Okay. How many students, current students that are going to the Holyoke school system? Okay. How many people in the room attended Holyoke public schools? Okay. Yeah. And how many work or teach in the school? Okay. So we see how all these things kind of intersect and stuff like that. How many are glad to see the city thinking about 2 new middle schools? Okay. And who lives in the Lawrence School District, this area that serves served by the school? Okay. Who lives in downtown, the 4 wards of downtown? Who lives there? Okay. And who lives just in Holyoke in general? Okay. Anyone from outside Holyoke? Okay. Okay, so one of the things that we want to do and just kind of understand, to begin this, and as Dory mentioned, this is very much about getting your feedback on this project and understanding, you know, what it is that you see as the needs for a new middle school here. So I just want to actually throw it out as a question. If anyone wants to share with us what they think, a new middle school in Holyoke should be about, like some of the kind of key issues, some of the, you know, ideas or dreams or aspirations that you think for a middle school. And this is just kind of open-ended, you know, just kind of anyone who wants to share something about what they think a middle school in Holyoke should be about. And be loud, be loud.
Yes. I'm Margaret Brown. I went to Lawrence Junior High. As someone who's taught at Holyoke High School, and I've done tutoring also and substitute teaching. And I've seen Lawrence and Lynch. I like it. I see a great number of buildings in Holyoke that are not in the shape of this building and Lynch. I believe that you ought to really be looking at the feasibility of renovating what we have and adding on and doing whatever you need to do. But I look on the news and I hear about some really whiz-bang, technologically perfect schools that don't have the money to hire those who can implement those. They're having the students do it. I think money needs to be looked at. Yes, we need to look at the next 20, 30, 50 years. But I think we ought to be a model of those who use what they have effectively.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm a current middle school teacher in Holyoke, and I've been a middle school teacher for 24 years and have seen, the Magnet Middle School, Lynch Middle School, Peck Middle School, and can speak to the need to have a middle school junior high model, just kind of developmentally speaking for the kids that we serve. The K-8 idea is nice, but it's just we have really done a disservice to the kids these past 10, 15 years. They're not ready to go to high school. The school that I'm at, the kids don't have lockers. We walk in lines. It's just not setting them up to be successful within the high school experience. So I hear what you're saying, but I also think that in terms of technology, the Lynch building is not going to be able, I think it would cost more money to make the Lynch building Wi-Fi accessible and able to handle the demands that these kids need in terms of technology and science and engineering and all of that stuff. So I'm glad that we are having this conversation. I think ideally, I would hope that if we're going to be talking about technology and developing an infrastructure to support it, that it will be sustainable. That's my only concern, is that if we invest money in a new building, that 10, 20 years from now, that we'll be able to keep up with the technology as it changes, but also have it be a model for middle school kids, developmentally and socially. So I hope that we're thinking about the mind of the adolescents, because we really haven't been failing them in the K-8 model these past 10 years.
Anyone else want to share? Well, there's going to be another opportunity at the end of the presentation for questions. Okay.
So in working with the school building committee, we wanted to provide an opportunity for people to speak at those meetings, but also to comment to us privately. And that the same is true with you all, that I know not everyone's comfortable speaking in a group like this. So we actually asked our school building committee members to fill out a survey, somewhat open-ended, but a little bit directed, so that we could get their input. And they shared their input. And one of the questions we asked, about what they felt was lacking and what kinds of resources they'd like to see in a new school. But we also asked this sort of open-ended question that Joseph suggested What do you imagine the headline being when this new school opens? And we want positive headlines around Holyoke schools. And this is what they came up with, and it meant a lot to us to hear it because it captured the spirit in some ways better than other things. So they said, Holyoke cultivates STEM growth and new middle school focused on technology. All Holyoke middle school students have access to world-class education facility. Holyoke's new middle school opens multiple learning pathways to its students. After 30 years, Holyoke opens state-of-the-art middle school. There were a couple other answers, but that kind of gave you the feeling for what the school building committee that's working with us is thinking. I'd like to ask you all to share your thoughts as well. So on your table, there are cards that we ask you to fill out that will tell us what drew you here, what your connection is, who you are, and lets you register if you're interested in being more a part of this process so we can contact you again. And then it also encourages you to go to a link where you can actually fill out that survey. And we would really appreciate it because it is really important for us to hear from you along the way. So we understand that this is part of a larger process in many ways. It's connected to other things that are going on. And there's, since we've been working with this city, we've been really impressed by how many committed and engaged educators we've met who are actively rethinking education. And that's been a really inspirational thing to us. And it will be a part of what we're doing to continue to connect with them throughout. What we found at the building committee is after we gathered and sifted through their feedback and talked about things with them, these are some of the things that came out of their interest in the school. They're set for us objectives that we hope to meet. You know, I think there's a big conceptual objective. What does the school mean? What does it need to be in the community? But also very specific ideas. So they also spoke about age-appropriate spaces, a need for STEM and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curricula that's appropriate to middle schoolers with an emphasis on hands-on learning. I know that Holyoke was once the pride of hands-on learning, and some of that's kind of gone away, and interestingly, the way these things work, there's a reinvigoration of the idea of hands-on learning in education, so that's come up a lot. Arts and music programs have been stressed as important. Providing diverse pathways. This is a consistent message from within the school building committee, but as well as throughout the district, that you have a variety of learners that have their own pathways, and with this day and age and with technology what it is, can we provide diverse pathways for students to go through school instead of a cookie-cutter approach. Better IT infrastructure, which relates to that, is so that there's ways that students are now potentially learning in multiple ways by use of technology along the way. And you're not going to be at the bleeding edge of that. A lot of things happen, and we've learned a lot about how technology has shaped the classroom, which is very helpful. Teacher collaboration spaces with so many different types of students. Teachers need to be able to meet and work together to assess students and their developmental needs and to respond accordingly. So actually, we never really designed for that type of space in the 1950s, so thinking about creating spaces for collaboration is really important. Talking about varied space needs rather than the 1950s model with all the same types of spaces. You enter, you go to your classroom, you're there all day, you leave. There's need now for students, particularly at this age range, to move from space to space, and for sometimes for you to meet with students in small groups. So we talk about different types of spaces and the need for different types of spaces, not a one-size-fits-all sort of down the hallway corridor kind of experience. Community connections and spaces comes up a lot. So we understand the importance of this facility, not just as a place of education, but also as a place of community and how it relates to the community. And this is really where you can play a big role in helping us to understand that a little bit more. What does it mean to be a school in the 21st century in terms of your relationship to community? Is it just about having gym access at night for basketball? Or could that school actually play a more active role in providing evening education opportunities for parents to pursue learning of their own, year-round learning, support services, community health services? Those are some of the questions that we've been asking. Sense of safety for students, that comes up a lot. It comes up a lot for us always on every project, but it also is something we're hearing from people in Holyoke. How do we make this an environment that makes students feel safe? Because students learn better when they feel that they are safe. And that's something you have to design for. It doesn't just happen. Then we get to some issues that are really also specifically about environmental quality. The importance of daylighting in views has come up as a priority for the district. Non-toxic materials and good air quality. You find in looking back at time, different generations of schools have different toxicity problems based on what the products that were going into schools at the time were. And then after hours use and year-round use. So that gives you a sense of some of the priorities that we're hearing, and I hope that they mirror some of your priorities. And when we get to questions and answers, I hope you can share other ideas that you don't see addressed. I'm going to introduce Margot Jones. She's going to talk a little bit about the specific ed programming process.
Okay, thanks, Dory, very much. I'll move through this quickly. I think the PowerPoint's going to be available online, so you can look at the details later. But basically, during this study phase, we take modern educational philosophy and apply it to the middle school. So you can see on the left, that's the way schools used to be designed. It was cells and bells. It was one classroom with kids lined up in a row and the expert teacher at the front. Well, it turns out that lecture-type learning is very ineffective, and that in fact, where we're going in the 21st century is making student-based learning, where they have hands-on opportunities to study the concepts of science and technology, and they make things, and by making things, they really understand the concepts that they're trying to learn. So the 21st century skills that will serve these children well as citizens and productive members of society are critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, and curiosity for lifelong learning. And these are skills that will make them good citizens and help them find their way through the world. So the concept is brain-based learning, and that is sort of what is fundamental to how we will design this school. It includes, as I said, hands-on learning and also movement. The kids that are stationary, their brain sort of goes to sleep. You need to really move around and use your whole body to learn. So, and you also need to feel safe in the learning environment at all times. Emotional engagement is very, very important, especially for middle school students who tend to sort of start to group think and are very peer-oriented and worried and distracted quite a bit, unfortunately, these days. Anyway, so we've got to really keep them engaged and provide an environment that's going to function very well, and that does include daylight and healthy air, etc., and thermal comfort, all those things that sometimes you're not getting currently. We also have found that if you have a connection to nature in school, it grounds you and gives your mind a place to go to, and that actually stimulates learning as well. So some of the concepts are that we want to use every square inch of this new school because learning can happen anywhere, and we want it to happen everywhere in the school. So as you can see in that picture, they're under the stairs and they're reading their books or talking to their friends and learning things. Learning in school is now well, not quite 24/7, but all day and all year process, and all those other things. It's very important that classrooms are inclusive for all kinds of learners and types of children, and that they're supported by current technology. So again, part of the brain-based approach to learning and teaching is that you explore ideas on multiple modalities. You can research and design your learning program. You actually make things, and then it's important to present those ideas and celebrate what you're learning, which is part of the social engagement as well, which is very, very critical at this age. So here are some spaces in schools that we like, and some of them we've designed, and some of them Laura Wernick from HMFH has designed, our Cambridge Educational Planner. Here is what's called it's a common space that's around 2 levels, so they share some tables and tech space there. This is Plain School, where we did clustered classrooms with a little common space and common areas with different types of furniture in the classrooms. And we'll get to this cluster design again. We like to provide little opportunities for small group learning and reading, and age-appropriate spaces. Again, we've heard over and over again that you need the right size furniture and places for middle school kids. We also know that the school becomes a community center, and MSBA is pretty generous with those kind of spaces, and we will design them so they're very multifunctional and very usable. The one on the left, this is Plain School, the CAF, where the picture's taken from the stage. This is the cafeteria, and it opens onto the gymnasium. This is a school in the Boston area where the community, it's almost like a mall. It's a celebrated space where people get to look at each other, and it's very active. So we hope to do that as well. And again, different size and types of spaces for learning. And then I'll just jump into a diagram that we're thinking about for the kinds of spaces that MSBA has guided us to develop for this school. Basically, on the first floor, on the ground floor, there'd be a very secure main entrance that would be overseen by the administration, and close to it as you came in would be family services, medical, and guidance. And then there'd be this common area. And this diagram, by the way, is not totally graphically to scale. It's just a concept at this point. The common space would have a cafeteria open to it. It would have a tech lab and an art lab open to it, and then a stage with the band room, and maybe this could serve as one big space, and food service and a service entrance off to one side. And again, access to the gymnasium, which will be available at night and off hours. And we want to have an outdoor space at this level as well. There would be some inclusive SPED rooms that are near the health center and the front door, so that folks with limited mobility would be able to get right to their learning environment. But then the 3 grades, 6, 7, and 8, would be are going to be organized into 2 different clusters. This is 180 kids per grade, roughly, for the 550 school, and each cluster would be 90 pupil grouping. And shared between those teams, essentially, would be part of a media center, some specialized educational spaces, a project space, and other small group offices and things such for guidance and an assistant principal. So we're going to be developing this design, but these are some concepts that quickly that we could show you. These clusters would have 4 academic classrooms around a common space, which we are calling a project area, with a specialized science lab as well, with prep room, and then 2 small group learning areas. So these teachers could share this one, and this also, there's a classroom for either English as a second language or the special ed classroom. And we're also hoping to get access to an outdoor area for each team. So these clusters are just different ways of organizing these spaces, and we'll be working with the teachers and the school building committee to figure out which is most functional for them. But this one is a little more, standardized. This arrow indicates the way to the shared common space on that grade level, so that each grade level will have 2 clusters, probably the same design. Here are some other ideas for for clusters. And sometimes the circulation goes right through this grouping of a team area, and sometimes it's on the edge. So we have to figure this out. That's the fun part, really. So another sort of concept that we're working from is that, as I said, the ground floor is the public part of the community, of the school. But there would be barriers along the way to make sure that anyone who comes into the school is wanted and that it's safe. So there'd be a natural buffer, there'd be some kind of plaza, all that core public space, and then the grades would be separated off for even greater safety. So, and now Christian's going to talk about site ideas.
Thank you. So, in another few months, I hope to be up here and presenting some actual designs, which will be more fun to go through. But we wanted to quickly go through some of the existing sites and some of the existing constraints and opportunities that we're exploring. So these are all the schools within the district. The statement of interest, which was the official document that went to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, was for the Lawrence School. And so that's the kind of focus. That's why we're meeting here tonight, and that's the focus of the study. As the district mentioned that they wanted to look at two 550 student middle schools. The Peck School obviously was another prime site. So we focused on those two at the very beginning. Again, we've only been at this for about a month and a half. But from there, we wanted to look a bit broader around the city. So we looked at the other schools, both the physical condition of those schools and the site, and how receptive that site is to a possible middle school, 550 student sized building and all that it requires. The McMahon Elementary School seemed like a possible candidate. It has a nice open site. The school's on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of the physical shape of the building. But unfortunately, the land all around that building is protected parkland. So it does not look very promising for a new site. During that discussion, there's also this site off of Whiting Farms Road. So this is the Kmart Plaza down here, and there's a fire station right there, a small white dot. And Whiting Farms Road curls around like this. So there's a potential of using this site up here. It's a little bit steep, especially on the east side of it. But there is some access from the south. So these are some of the sites that we're starting to explore. For the Lawrence site, here we are in the cafeteria right here. So we're exploring both the Lawrence site and the site across the street, the Chestnut Street site, as we're calling it. We certainly are looking at an addition renovation option for the Lawrence School. As Dory mentioned, the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, requires us to look at an 1,100 student school. They're also requiring us to look at an ad reno school. And it's certainly something that we're interested in. I think that it'll come down to an issue of cost and also how flexible this existing school is for some of the concepts that Margot went through on a new 21st century middle school and seeing how closely those can align. Certainly building new on the Chestnut Street site is enticing. It's pretty rare to find an open block in an urban downtown environment like this, and one that really has a lot of really beautiful and interesting bones around it. So when we look at that site, the Chestnut Street site in particular, one of the main things that hit us right away was the interaction between what we hope will be the new front door and the existing park outside of the library there. That really the park is framed very nicely.
Republican newspaper and Mass Live. We are
a new
in
development
Holyoke
to the
at the
corner of
Lawrence
that,
School.
could work very well
Presentation to the
with
community about the
what's going on in
possibility
Holyoke
of
already.
Holyoke building 1 or 2
Walking down
new middle schools.
Cabot Street and Hampshire Street, you
And
don't
the
notice the
gentleman
grades
speaking
so
now is
much.
with an
Those are pretty
architectural
gentle
firm
grades,
who's been
but
hired
really going from
to do an
this corner
$800,000
of
study.
Elm and Hampshire
Thank you for
down to
joining
this
us.
corner of Cabot and Chestnut, it's about a 20-foot change in elevation. So there are some pretty significant grades on this site, which presents some constraints in terms of which floor level we'll have to meet where, but it also provides some opportunities of really helping this block feel a little bit like a campus and having some separation between that school block and the surrounding streets. And kind of like that diagram that Margot showed earlier, giving some natural separation between this public urban environment and a little bit more of a private, secure school environment. Certainly the size of the buildings around the neighborhood, a new 3 to 4 story school would fit in well. And then another thing to note is just that the grid, the urban grid is offset from the cardinal directions about 45 degrees. So when we start thinking about natural daylighting and bringing in controllable southern or northern light into the school, we'll have to wrestle with the difference between the cardinal directions and the urban street grid. The Peck site, which is another one that we studied from the very beginning, fairly close to the Lawrence site, but a little bit convoluted in getting from one to the other. Tucked back in a residential neighborhood with the dingle to the north of it. There's this really unique relationship between the Peck School and the existing high school. Something that really, I think, could be celebrated and done better than it is now. So that's something that struck us right away. At first we were looking at, because one of the things that we'll have to consider is where the students will go while construction is happening. So we're thinking about all of those phasing issues. So one thing that we wanted to explore was keeping the Peck School functioning while we built a new school to the north of it. But after spending some time really evaluating the dingle and spending some time there, it looks very difficult, if not impossible. There's a lot of noise concerns from Beach Street. All this area shaded in gray here is quite steep and sloping to the north, so not so good for solar access for the new school. And then this dashed green line is showing a path that's needed to access the electrical substation that's up here at the top of that, up at that corner. But certainly a new formalized connection between the high school and that site really could become a nice amenity to that site. Similarly, a better connection between the school and Crozier Field. It's another great opportunity right next to that school site. Our initial thoughts is to pull the building back a little bit from this residential neighborhood. It is an interesting site in that it feels like it's kind of the backyard of all of these small houses, and not really on the public side of Beach Street like the high school is. So giving it a little bit more room and breathing space, especially to the south and the east where you can get some nice solar access, would be nice. Given the grades that are in that area, it would be a tiered building, but the challenge, and I think one that could work out quite nicely, is how to make that tiered building join together so it's not in separate pods like the existing school is, and then bringing the parking a little bit closer to the site. So as I mentioned, this was another site that really just came up 2 days ago, so we haven't had that much time to study all the ins and outs, but this parcel right here, outlining there, is another potential site. Again, on the east side it is quite steep, but it is accessible from the south. This is I-91, and this is the Kmart shopping center. So one thing that we'll be evaluating as we go forward with our consultants and with the building committee is costs, project costs in general, and then project costs that are specific to the city of Holyoke. Site costs can become very important in that process. So we'll be evaluating both Peck and Whiting Farms in terms of location and also in terms of cost and just how well those sites would serve a new middle school. So as Jory mentioned, we're very early in the process. We're here in February. This orange block is us evaluating existing conditions, getting several different options on the table and submitting those to the state. Then we start moving forward into a preferred design. So we start narrowing in on what the city and what you all would like to do for a preferred schematic. And if that gets approved by the state, then we start moving forward into schematic design where we really start getting into the details a little bit and have a much better idea of construction costs. And so that's what happens by I think this has been extended actually a little bit from where the state deadlines have fallen. So that gets extended to the end of December, and then we start talking about dollars and cents, and if we move forward into the more detailed design development and construction documents. So we want to open it back up and see if you have any questions or comments, thoughts on the sites, or thoughts on the programming that Margot went through, or the process, anything that we can answer. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there have been any studies on, in a small urban setting, of the advantages and disadvantages of a school of middle school kids, 1,000 versus 550.
Yeah, I don't know of any literature that talks specifically at that size or that scale. That the problem is that there's so many variables that to find literature that cuts across a double-blind analysis of one size school versus another. We've certainly heard from the building committee and from the district that there's not much of a appetite for an 1,100 student school. It seems like an awful lot of kids, particularly at that age group, together. There's also, the factors of the geographic diversity in Holyoke and busing costs and things of that nature to consider. But that's something that we'll evaluate. So not only the construction cost impact, but also the operating cost impact. But I think that from the state side, so they're, it's a grant agency and they have the hoops that we need to jump through. They just want to make sure that we're exploring all of our options. I don't think that they're determined that it be one size or another. They just want to make sure that we're really looking at all the options along the way.
Yeah. Has the Lynch site been considered at all?
We did look at that. It's fairly constrained in its size and its location. And so because of those factors, it was not given as in-depth of a consideration as McMahon was, but that was our...
The STV study we looked at Lynch, and what we were told is that just to get Lynch back up to code would require a huge investment, and it was not worth investing in the Lynch site. So prior to engaging in this MSBA process, the building authority allowed us to do a assessment of our school, all our schools, and we included Lynch in that. And it scored the lowest, predictably, because it hasn't been a school in a while. But also, we were told it's not worth the investment to bring it back, given how much disrepair is there, and then to bring it up to code would require tremendous investment. So we did look at it.
But I have questions about that because, and no offense, I apologize because I was late, but that did used to be a middle school. It's a mid-century modern, it's a beautiful piece of architecture. It's been sitting vacant forever. We already own it. You're talking about multi-levels anyway. If you went up, when you have enough square footage. And we've been told many times in the city of Holyoke that buildings are not fixable and then turned around and a private company comes in like Holyoke Catholic. We have a spectacular Race Street. They just did beautiful condos and apartments down there. I would really like to see numbers for that. We don't even know what it's going to cost to build new schools, but we don't know what it's going to cost to fix Lynch. And unless there's a formal report somewhere, I personally think that Lynch would be a great location. It has sidewalks. I don't mind Lawrence. Peck is going to be very tricky with the dingle. I don't think you can ever do anything with that dingle. I don't know. But I really don't want to say, oh, can't do Lynch unless I get to see some numbers.
Yeah, and so there has been a published report that Dr. Zreck mentioned. So I'm a little bit outside my knowledge base, but I think the MSBA helped the district hire an outside architecture firm, STB, who came through and evaluated all of the different buildings and gave each one a score. And that's where a lot of that building side of it, in terms of the cost to upgrade the Lynch building. There are some site questions as well, but certainly that's something that we can take a look at and put it back on the table.
What I can tell you, Beth, is that the Lynch is about half the size of the proposed school to meet the needs of 550 kids. So the size of the basic structure is half of what we would need to pursue our basic plans.
But how many square feet are there now?
About 50,000 square feet.
And how many square feet are we talking for 500 kids?
I think was what they were at.
How many, I'm sorry?
About 110,000.
For 550 kids?
That's correct.
That's the initial analysis.
How much does Holyoke community have, for God's sake? I mean, this is a lot of square feet.
It's fitting the state model for what they feel is necessary for the educational needs at the current time and what they would refer to the community for.
So I think it's great that we're doing this. I think it's about time. And I think our students deserve a brand new state-of-the-art building. I think some of our buildings and trust me, I'm a lover of Lynch, but I think our kids, it's time. It's really, really time that we give them state-of-the-art. Let's really start supporting them so they can do great things. But current status, we don't have the technology. We don't have the building space. So I love this. I think it's great. And I think what you guys are doing is great. But I'm going to make a couple of little negatives. So I watched the slideshow and I saw the pictures. A couple things that concern me. Just so you know, I'm the head of the SPED pack, so I tend to automatically gravitate towards the special ed students in the district. When I looked at the pictures and the break areas and things like that, I didn't see any sensory equipment, any beanbag chairs, or anything sensory in any of those pictures, which was concerning. I didn't see that it was really handicap accessible, to be honest, in those pictures. And another concern is there was that great picture of the school in Boston with the huge staircase. We need to be mindful that some of our students are in wheelchairs, and they shouldn't be segregated by having to use an elevator. This school needs to be in the process of thinking. We need to think of ramps so that they can be with their peers and their peer partners walking and navigating this school. So when you guys are doing your planning and thinking, I want you to really keep in mind that we have a high population of special ed students in this district, and they need to start being in the forefront of all planning in this district. So I need to see more of that kind of stuff. When I'm looking at your planning and I'm hearing your designs, I think it's all great, but I want to know how you're integrating our special ed students. And I personally wasn't a fan of seeing bubbles of sped rooms. We're working towards having a more integrated district, if I'm not mistaken, and making sure that our special ed students are integrated more into the classrooms. So seeing some specifically designated areas is kind of concerning. I want to see more fluid. I want to see more access. And that was concerning in your diagram. So.
Let me try and respond to some of those things, because we've actually, we hear you completely, we've actually been doing an assessment, and when you start this process, the state gives you this sort of assumption about spaces. And spaces for special education students are under the guidelines of DESE. So we do have to account for where those students are, and that, but we've already learned a lot about the requirements for the population in Holyoke, and as a result, the amount of space available in this school will be significantly higher than what the state assumed, and that will not be a problem for us to get that extra space. We do have to show it as to where it is, but we do understand the inclusion model. I think, in fact, I think it's helpful to kind of go back to that diagram a little bit. There are some students in the SHINE program who will be in a particular space. So that first cluster that you see at the bottom, that actually is specifically for those designated classrooms, whereas the intent in the other areas that we're showing is to show those support spaces that would be throughout the school intentionally. So we do have to account for where they are, but we're intentionally trying to be sure that they're integrated, so both there as well as within the cluster where you have an additional classroom space. And some of it's a little bit about being sure that you provide that flexibility, because we want to have the ability for students to be in a special education class for a while and then also be integrated, so that kind of pull-out, push-in process is happening in Holyoke.